Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Debrief on ABC News Live. I'm Kimberly Brooks. Thanks so much for joining us. We have the latest on those 6 Philadelphia police officers who were shot in a standoff. Plus, we're checking out the stock market declines, and we're still talking about Rock Nation joining forces with the NFL, and we'll listen to what JayZ had to say about all of it. But first, here are your headlines.
New details this morning about the death of accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. The Washington Post reports the autopsy found broken bones in his neck. ABC News has confirmed Epstein died by suicide using sheets. In the wake of his death, 2 lawsuits have been filed by women who say Epstein abused them as teenagers. One woman is taking aim at his companies. The other is targeting Epstein's ex-girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, and 3 other associates. Thousands of people attended a memorial service last night for the victims of the mass shooting in El Paso, Texas. Phones lit up the local stadium as the names of the 22 victims were read, less than 10 miles from the Walmart where they lost their lives. The governor of Texas announced he's forming a task force to fight domestic terrorism.
An airline disaster averted in Russia. A passenger plane with more than 230 people on board made an emergency landing in a field just after taking off from an airport in Moscow. Ural Airlines says both engines shut down after birds got sucked into them. More than 20 people have been injured.
In an ABC News exclusive, Cameron Boyce's parents sitting down with our Robin Roberts.
What kind of child was he growing up?
The kindest, sweetest human you could possibly meet.
Opening up about the last night their son was alive.
We were texting that night. We were texting about the Lakers. We were texting back and forth up until 12:30. And somewhere between the last text he sent me in the morning, he was gone.
Cameron passing away suddenly in his sleep due to a seizure, which was the result of epilepsy. This close call from some kayakers in Michigan. That massive chunk of cliff collapsed. Look at all of that, narrowly missing them before falling into Lake Superior. The tour guide says they were paddling away when the rocks missed them by about 50 feet.
And we begin with a terrifying standoff in Philadelphia, a shootout during a narcotics operation that left 6 officers wounded, and 2 officers were trapped inside a building with the shooter for several hours. And our Gio Benitez is right there on the scene with the latest. Gio?
Hey there, Kim. It was just a frightening scene here for so many residents and officers. You can see that investigators are still here. They're going to be here all day long. We know that those officers who were injured are going to make a full recovery. They have non-life-threatening injuries. But take a look at this dramatic video right now. That surrender caught on camera. Police say they were serving a narcotics warrant here at this home when Maurice Hill opened fire, holding some officers hostage. All of it played out on live TV. Bullets ricocheting off the sidewalk and nearby homes as officers crawled and crouched to avoid getting hit. Listen, and you can hear the bullets. The shootout started while officers were serving Hill with a narcotics warrant.
We have an officer shot, and they're still being shot at.
The situation quickly escalating when Hill, armed with multiple firearms, barricaded himself inside a home, holding 2 police officers hostage.
The guy's still on the stairwell shooting through the front window.
Police rushing their wounded brothers away from the barrage of bullets. One officer limping, hit in the leg, another in the arm.
It was like 100 shots.
SWAT teams rushing toward the home, crowds of officers surrounding the home on all sides, dozens of patrol cars filling the streets, the neighborhood, including a nearby Temple University campus on lockdown.
I heard so many gunshots.
Several hours after the standoff began, remarkably, all of the officers were transported to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries.
This is nothing short of a miracle that we don't have multiple officers killed today.
After the hostages were released, the gunman, who phoned his attorney, Shaka Johnson, finally agreeing to speak with negotiators and hours later surrendering. And the police chief right there calling this a miracle, and it's no wonder why, because we're talking about more than 100 bullets fired here. Some of these residents jumping over fences to get away from the gunfire. Just a terrifying situation. Kim?
All right, thank you, Gio, for the details. And we move over to the New York Stock Exchange, where the Dow Jones Industrial Average posted its largest decline this year, dropping 800 points yesterday, and perhaps a warning sign about the risk of a coming recession. But even with stock market woes, there are many companies that are doing well in this current economy. In fact, Inc.com just released its annual guide of the 5,000 fastest growing privately held companies in the U.S. And I'm joined by Ismail Rickson, the CEO of FE International, to break it down. Glad you're with us, because I guess the question is, how are these 5,000 companies doing so well?
Yeah, they're faring very, very well. And thanks for having me. Because a lot of these companies have grown very organically over time. So they're bootstrap companies that very often kind of fly under the radar of the stock market, serving other SMBs. So what we're noticing is that these companies over the years, and the Inc. itself, takes an average of the last 3 years of revenue. So we're very much noticing that those companies have slowly and organically grown over time, and they're obviously being awarded with that growth and recognition of that that's been recently released.
Absolutely. So we talked about, the stock market drops. So how are they faring in this current global economy?
Yeah, it hasn't necessarily trickled down so far yet, just because a lot of the companies here, which are mainly privately held companies, tend to serve other SMBs or maybe kind of be, consumer focused instead of serving a lot of companies that would actually be, on the stock exchange, which are very largely affected by what's going on currently. So we haven't necessarily noticed a huge trickle down. That's not to say it may not come in the future, but a lot of these companies are going to be served very well by the fact that they've grown organically. They may have grown without, with very, very little debt, and grown through kind of reinvesting profits over time. So they do stand to serve and kind of weather these markets for at least the next 6 to 12 months in terms of what we would expect to see.
It's interesting because I looked at the list. I was checking out this list, and I looked at the first 200 companies, and I literally only recognized one of them. But of course, all eyes are going to number one, because the question is, how did they become number one? How did Freestar get there? Yeah,
Freestar's quite an interesting story, actually. So they actually started out doing something a little different to what they're doing today. So they've kind of innovated over time. They very much started out just making calendars that you'd find, at home or in your office, and putting, ads on there. And over time, they've just, evolved into, what is a very fast-growing, very large advertising optimization company. But that's very indicative of lots of the companies you see on the list. You may not necessarily have heard of them, and they're not household names yet. And we've certainly had other companies become household names, like Microsoft, Zappo, Intuit have all featured on the list in the past. But you may in the future hear a lot of these companies just through the fact that they're either going to be acquired by bigger companies to consolidate in the market, or potentially just continue growing as they have been so far.
It's so interesting. And the other thing is that your company is actually releasing a new report.
Yeah, absolutely. So we analyze, or over the course of time, we've analyzed around 21,000 small businesses and kind of their M&A activity. And every year we release a new report going into the M&A in the tech sector, the M&A that may fall aside from what you tend to read in the mainstream media. And what we're very much finding is that the activity in 2019 so far is meeting the activity in 2018 and 2017, which were both very much record years. And we expect plenty to continue this year. I mean, we've just seen lots of IPOs. WeWork have just announced their filing this week as well. And I think Salesforce is kind of continuing to consolidate. Vimeo's buying live stream. So these companies who are slightly larger are really focusing on thinking, well, over the next 12 months, 24 months, we're going to need to provide much more to our customers to retain them, especially if the markets do take a bit of a dip. So acquisitions is one very, very good way of doing that.
And do you enjoy all of this? These lists coming out and sifting through all of this information?
It is exciting. So it provides a platform to a lot of these companies that do very well, but like I said, fly under the radar. So it's good, certainly for our business. I mean, we're in M&A. We're actually on the list this year as well. And a lot of the clients that we work with, it's good to either see them recognized, or it gives them targets for companies that they may want to acquire in the future as well. So, generally very, very exciting to see all the companies up there.
All right, Ismail Rickson from FE International, the CEO. Thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And guys, we're moving to Washington. New information out. The Israel official has confirmed that they will not allow Representatives Omar and Rashida Talib to enter the country. So I want to bring in Rachel Scott with the details of this. Rachel, can you just give us the updates on what President Trump just tweeted out right now?
Yeah, strong words from Israel there saying the decision has been made and the decision is to not allow them to enter. President Trump did weigh in. I want to read you a tweet that he said. He said it would show great weakness if Israel allowed Representative Omar and Representative Talib to visit. The president then claiming they hate Israel and all Jewish people and that there is nothing that can be said or done to change their minds. Minnesota and Michigan, he adds, will have a hard time putting them back in office. They are such a disgrace, the president tweeted. And this appears to be one of the first times that they are coming back into this line of attack after those send her back chants erupted at the president's rally in Greenville, North Carolina a few weeks ago. At the president's rally in Ohio, following that, he did not mention any of those 4 congresswomen of color by name, but obviously they still prove to be in the line of attack for the president. Kimberly.
All right. And Rachel, I want to bring in Rick Klein for more on this conversation. Rick, what are we supposed to make of this, especially as the president is going to his rally tonight? This is definitely going to cause a little bit of controversy.
On one level, it is Israel following its own law. They bar the entry of people that are associated publicly with the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanction movement. Both congresswomen have been involved in that in the past. But on another level, this is an aggressive move by the president to weigh in this matter before Israel made the decision, now for Israel to have made the decision. And there is a small irony in this that I think needs to be pointed out. Congresswoman Talib is Palestinian American. She has family in the West Bank. So those chants of send them back and the president's suggestion that they go back to where they came from, they're not being allowed, in the case of Congresswoman Talib, to visit family where she has roots, a place that she has roots. So it would appear, at least on the surface, that she couldn't go back even if she wanted to as part of a congressional delegation official visit by a member of Congress.
Yeah, and so this is going on. There's lots going on because, Rachel, as we mentioned, the president has a rally tonight. The economy is definitely one of his sticking points. But with the stock market declining, what would this mean for his base if we actually entered into a recession?
Well, we know that the economy is a sticking point for the president's base. So we know that they support the president. I travel the country talking to the supporters of the president at his rallies, and they say, listen, sometimes we think the president tweets too much. Sometimes we think his rhetoric could be a little too harsh. But they say we support the president because of how he has proven to handle the economy. And our latest poll from last month showed that. Our latest poll from ABC News, Washington Post poll showed that 51% of Americans approved of the president's handling of the economy. But just any talk of a possible recession, Kimberly, could just be a gut punch to the president's base. And so we will have to see how this all weighs out. We know that the president tweeted yesterday, despite Wall Street seeing one of its worst days of the year, that the economy is still good. He pushed off the blame, and he even blamed the Federal Reserve. I want to read to you one of the tweets he said as this trade war with China looms. He said, "We are winning big time against China," adding that prices to us have not gone up, and in some cases have come down. He went on to call Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, clueless. But remember here, Kimberly, economists say that the U.S. and China, both sides, lose in this ongoing and escalating trade war. These hundreds of billions of dollars worth of tariffs get passed on to U.S. businesses and then get passed on to U.S. consumers, not to mention that farmers are caught in the crossfire of all of this. China has asked its imports to stop making U.S. agricultural purchases. So they're kind of in limbo here as well. The White House offering assistance to them. But again, on this issue of the economy, we know that this is a sticking point for the president's base. The question is will this trade deal come through with China? We know both sides are talking. And will this move any needle with the president's base, Kimberly?
All right, Rachel Scott right there in Bedminster, New Jersey. And I want to go back to Rick because we want to take a look at what's happening with some of the 2020 Democratic candidates. We heard from Beto O'Rourke this morning, who's relaunching his campaign. And we saw him talking about the mass shooting in El Paso that reshaped his approach. So let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Counties that hosted a Donald Trump rally saw hate crimes increase by more than 200%. I want to make clear to you, to us, to the country, that what he says and what he does not just offend our sensibilities or our understanding of the traditions of this great country. It changes who we are as a country. You do not get somebody driving 600 miles to come to this community in his manifesto repeating the very words used by the President of the United States to justify this act of terror. and hatred and violence and death.
Yes, a community deeply affected. Rick, what does this mean for his campaign?
He is going to do it differently. He has made clear that he was changed by the events in El Paso and that he will change his campaign as a result of it. One tangible impact is that he says he's going to spend less time in places like Iowa and New Hampshire, more time in places like Mississippi and Oklahoma. In fact, he's going to do a trip to Mississippi, to a community that saw several members removed by ICE agents, leaving some children essentially unaccompanied on U.S. soil. Oklahoma, the site of a large Native American population. He's talked about visiting Muslim communities. He says he's going to take the fight to Donald Trump, and that means going to the communities that feel impacted and imperiled by the president's actions. So it would be a different look from Beto O'Rourke with some tangible differences in terms of campaign strategy. We should note he's been struggling in the low single digits in the polls. He could use a boost in some way, and he feels re-energized by the events in his hometown over the last couple of weeks.
So that's what's happening with Beto, but we also have some candidates dropping out of the race now.
Yeah, John Hickenlooper, the former governor of Colorado, his campaign aides are telling ABC News that he is leaving that race and will be opening the door to running for Senate in Colorado. A lot of people have been urging him to consider that, as they've been urging Beto O'Rourke to run for Senate in Texas. That's not happening, but it might be happening for Governor Hickenlooper, Colorado, a purple state that's been trending blue. It has a Republican senator in Cory Gardner, who's among the most endangered in the country. And Hickenlooper's campaign is more moderate centrist message. It really never caught on. And we're being told that he will be ending that campaign today.
All right, Rick Klein right there in our D.C. bureau. Thank you so much for the updates. And guys, we turn to some controversial, provocative statements from Republican Congressman Steve King of Iowa, who questioned if humanity would exist if not for rape or incest. This was his defense for banning abortions in all cases with no exception. So take a listen to his comment here.
What if it was okay, and what if we went back through all the family trees and just pulled those people out that were products of rape and incest? Would there be any population of the world left if we did that, considering all the wars and all the rape and pillage that's taken place?
All right, so you hear that, and now there's new calls by Democrats for him to resign. So I want to bring in Professor Lena Maria Murillo from University of Iowa, focusing on gender, women, and sexuality studies at the university. Glad you're with us. What did you make of these comments when you heard them?
Thank you so much for having me. First, I have to say, while the words are shocking themselves, I'm actually not surprised that they came from Steve King. He's essentially condoning sexual violence as a means to procreate, which is very extreme and in some ways falls in line with the other extreme things that he said on immigration and issues of race recently. For instance, the New York Times has comment about Western civilization and white nationalism becoming bad terms. So sexual assault as a means of procreation is very much, I believe, an extreme position.
Yes, and what does this mean for the community? You know, what do these words mean when they hear their representatives saying something like this, especially women who may have been impacted by sexual assault or violence?
I think they're quite damaging, honestly. We are, as people who have children or not, as women, we are being assaulted right now by very conservative groups. He was speaking to a conservative group in the suburbs of Des Moines, who they themselves might be shocked by some of this language. In fact, 53% of Americans, they continue to support the accessibility of abortion. Under certain circumstances. Those circumstances tend to be rape and incest. He is talking to a very marginal group of people. I believe it's at 20% of people who do not believe abortion should be allowed under any circumstances. So he is talking to, perhaps he's talking to his base. Again, I believe a very marginal group of people who believe this.
All right. Yes, provocative for sure. Professor Lena Maria Murillo from University of Iowa, thanks for being with us today. And guys, as you know, Flint, Michigan has been in the news for over 5 years because of its ongoing water crisis. And unfortunately, it's not the only one. New reports out of Newark, New Jersey showing elevated lead levels in the water and that the filters that were passed out to prevent the lead from leaching into the drinking water may not be doing the job. So Whit Johnson is in Newark with the updates. Whit?
Kimberly, outrage and frustration here in Newark amid growing fears of lead contamination. Tens of thousands of residents told not to drink water from the tap. So hundreds of people were forced to wait in long lines in the summer heat on Wednesday to pick up bottles of water. Many wondering if Newark may be the new Flint, Michigan, where residents were exposed to dangerous lead levels in their drinking water. Now in Newark, there are growing calls for the city's mayor to step down. The crisis has been brewing for nearly 3 years, coming to a head last week when the EPA found elevated levels of lead in 2 homes that were using special filters intended to clean the water, blaming a corrosion control issue at one of the city's water treatment plants. But adding insult to injury here, officials had to temporarily stop giving out those bottles of water after many of them were found to be past their best buy dates. So city officials will be back out here at this rec center and other locations across the city handing out that bottled water once again later today. Kimberly?
All right. Thank you, Whit, for that. We appreciate it. And guys, we're still talking about the partnership that no one expected between the NFL and JayZ's Rock Nation, a partnership that will give Rock Nation the power to choose performers for live events and work on social justice issues that have plagued the league ever since Colin Kaepernick took a knee. So here's JayZ and the NFL commissioner at their media session yesterday. Take a listen.
I think we take it back. I think that we forget that Colin's whole thing was to bring attention to social injustice, correct? So in that case, right, this is a success, right? This is the next thing, right? Because there's 2 parts of protesting. You go outside and you protest, and then the company or the individual say, I hear you.
We listened to our players. We understood what our players were saying. And we created a platform of which to help drive change in communities that Colin has raised and that other players have raised. And this partnership, in addition to the entertainment aspect and bringing football and music together, is going to help us make even greater change.
All right, so I want to bring in Jason Reed, who's a senior NFL writer for ESPN's The Undefeated. Thank you for being with us because I want to continue this conversation. You wrote when this happened that this is exactly what the NFL needed, and you called it a Nixon goes to China moment. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, from the NFL's perspective, partnering with someone like JayZ is just a heaven-sent gift. You're talking about someone who has enormous credibility within the black community. And as you talked about a minute ago, the NFL has been plagued with problems with people not being happy with them, with artists not wanting to perform at the Super Bowl. So bringing in someone like JayZ to lead your endeavors in music and entertainment, it just makes a ton of sense for the NFL because JayZ has the type of credibility that the NFL needs to try to win over black folk again.
Yes, but I think it's confusing and it's hard for people to believe that he would partner without having Colin Kaepernick as part of the deal. So how does that work?
Well, a couple things about that. Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, can't mandate that an NFL team has to employ Colin Kaepernick. And I think from Jay's perspective, he was looking at, okay, I have the possibility of potentially helping millions of people with this partnership, which will be a big part around social justice. Do I do that? Or do I say, because one person doesn't have a job right now, that I'm not going to do that? And he even said that at the press conference. That was part of his rationale. And also he talked about the fact about people evolving and situations evolving. The protests initially were not about Colin Kaepernick not having a job. The protests were about shining a light on police brutality and systemic oppression. So from Jay's perspective, okay, that phase is over now, or that phase is at least completed from the standpoint of where do we go next? And for Jay, this is where he's going next.
Yeah, I guess it's just difficult because him kneeling, him not having a job is based on the social justice issues. So it's like people can't really put those 2 together. But this is what I want to ask you, because from the history of JayZ and Beyonce and the way that they roll out campaigns and roll out music and everything that they do you believe that maybe we we don't have the full story, that maybe something will be coming later?
Oh, absolutely, because JayZ is playing chess when everybody else is not even playing checkers.
Right.
So I don't know what's going to happen here, which is why I'm taking the long view. I'm not going to judge this until 3, 4, 5 years down the road, because I don't know what Jay's plan is, but I know based on what he's done throughout his career and how he surprised us and how he doesn't tell you initially the whole thing, I'm going to wait and see what he does.
Yeah, because the thing is as this has been going on, Colin Kaepernick has also been putting out some videos, and he just put another video out yesterday showing that he's been, the anniversary of when he first started protesting. So I think we have a quick look at that if we can show it.
This stand wasn't for me. This is because I'm seeing things happen to people that don't have a voice.
When he took that knee, he took the knee for my child.
49ers quarterback knelt instead of standing during the national anthem at last night's game.
He's expected to kneel once again and protest to what he says are social.
All right, so Jason, what you're telling me is that you think there may be more here than what we actually see right now.
Oh, there's definitely more here because JayZ hasn't explained all of his plans. He hasn't laid out everything he's going to do. But again, knowing what he's done throughout his career and knowing that he has not told everybody or showed everybody right off the bat what he's going to do, there's definitely more to come.
All right, well, we're definitely going to have our eyes on it, and we're going to be looking out for your next article because I know you're going to be writing about it. Yes. All right, Jason Reed from The Undefeated, thank you so much for being with us. And guys, before we go, we're checking out a convention for the cool kids. If you love podcasts, like really love them, then you should probably be down in Florida for Podcast Movement 2019, the conference for aspiring and professional podcasters all over the country. And our Brad Milkey, host of ABC's award-winning podcast Start Here, is right there in Orlando. Brad, good to see you. I didn't even know there was a podcast convention. What should we know about this?
No, yeah, and so I host a podcast, but I'm also just a podcast nerd, and I am freaking out right now because this is what you look at when you come into this convention. So this started as a group of hobbyists, just people who liked making podcasts, who would sit around in their garage and would talk into microphones. That's, of course, where a lot of this industry was. Well, now, look at it. This is the convention that we're looking at right now. And as you see right behind me, groups like Spotify, groups like Google is right over there, iHeartRadio. I mean, these big companies are pouring serious money into podcasting right now. And so what you've got is this convention of 3,000 people or so that are here today. They're actually taping some podcasts as we speak right now. There are people who are looking at audio equipment, but more importantly, this is the place where you can nerd out and meet your podcast idols. I mean, they've got the creators of true crime podcasts like Dirty John and Cold. They've got the creators of the Ron Burgundy podcast for comedy geeks. And they have a lot of news podcasts, including Start Here and others. And a lot of people are sort of meeting all these podcasters throughout the day and getting a sense of what it takes to take what you're doing to the next level.
I love this. You're like a celebrity there. I want to know before we go, what are the trends in podcasting that people should be looking for? Because it's obviously grown a lot.
Yeah, well, so like I said, there's so much more money getting involved, and that's important. And think about how that's going to affect whatever podcast diet you like in the future. So if people, have been really digging that show from, their favorite content creators, well, all of a sudden advertisers are learning how many listeners are listening to these podcasts, and money is starting to pour in. So now you've got brand new brands. Himalaya is a new group that's been pouring money into podcasts. Luminary has actually created this new model where they're asking you to pay for your podcast. And that's the big question everyone is wondering today, Kimberly, is there going to be a point where a lot of people are going to start having these Netflix-style subscriptions for their favorite podcast networks? And that's where a lot of people get nervous, because podcasting has always been free. People have been into free podcasting. So there's a little bit of anxiety. But Kimberly, to relieve people of that anxiety, look at this. There's puppies.
Yes.
They set up a puppy booth just to give people some extra love. If you're feeling stressed out at all, if you've got to go speak up on this big stage in a bit, which is where I'll be in just an hour, you can hang out with some puppies and make yourself a little bit more at home.
Brad, you're amazing. I would definitely subscribe to Start Here and pay for it. You're awesome. So thank you so much. That looks amazing. It looks incredible. Good luck.
Really fun. Later.
All right, guys, puppies. All you need is puppies. Continue to take care of yourselves. And if you're around, you can stick around for the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. Then check out World News Prime at 8 p.m. And if you want to stay updated on all of these headlines, you can go to abcnews.com or download the app. I'm Kimberly Brooks, and I'll see you tomorrow.